Hello, everyone, and welcome to a look at the supply chain as we're headed into 2022. I'm Elizabeth Engler-Modick, editor of GIE Media's manufacturing group of magazines, and I'll be today's moderator. Before we hear from Lisa Anderson, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Big Kaiser Precision Tooling's mission is to find the best of the best and deliver it to customers with a personal commitment of helping them install truly efficient solutions. Big Kaiser has exceptionally high standards for the products they represent, resulting in an all-star lineup of products that deliver true and measurable performance advantages. Products are engineered to exacting standards and manufactured with materials and craftsmanship that enable superior performance. Big Kaiser delivers the most accurate and efficient tooling solutions guaranteed. Kyocera SGS Precision Tools is a manufacturer of industry-leading round solid carbide cutting tools. KSPT is proud to have pioneered some of the world's most advanced cutting tool technologies, resulting from the rigorous product coding and material testing within its Global Innovation Center. It's this commitment to innovation that has launched patented products and technologies. KSPT technical sales engineers, application specialists, and distribution partners blanket the globe, delivering reliable service and support to all market segments. As the industry leader in machinery design and digital innovation, Makino introduces game-changing solutions for premium performance. Makino produces the most accurate and highest quality metal cutting and EDM machines, horizontal machining centers, vertical machining centers, 5-axis machining centers, graphite machining centers, and wire and sinker EDMs. With deep-seated engineering expertise, Makino helps you understand installation and setup and optimizes processes to bring out the best in your machine and your operators. And when you need help right away, Makino's 24/7 customer service hotline is staffed by highly qualified Makino service technicians. Part of our global industrial engineering group, Sandvik Coromant is at the forefront of manufacturing tools, machining solutions, and knowledge that drive industry standards and innovations demanded by the metalworking industry now and into the next industrial era. Educational support, extensive R&D investment, and strong customer partnerships ensure the development of machining technologies that change, lead, and drive the future of manufacturing. Now, a little bit about Lisa. Ranked number 16 in SAP's supply chain influencers and recognized as one of the top 1% of consultants worldwide, Lisa Anderson has deep experience partnering with manufacturers and distributors to maximize value. Lisa is the founder and president of LMA Consulting Group, Inc., which specializes in manufacturing strategy and end-to-end supply chain transformation that maximizes the customer experience and enables profitable, scalable, dramatic business growth. Known for creating bold customer promises and profits, she is experienced in working with closely held, private equity-backed, and large, complex organizations in a range of industries. If it relates to improving the performance of a manufacturer, Lisa has done it. With that, welcome, Lisa, and the Zoom platform is all yours.
All right. Well, excited today to talk about what's going to look at the supply chain as we head into 2022. So let me share my screen here. You know, I thought the best way to start is a key client is experiencing so many supply chain disruptions, and they're typically speaking proactive. They had moved from the majority of their production from China to Vietnam ahead of the pack, the rest of the crowd, if you will. And so what they are in the process of currently is moving all their production to North America, or at least 80% of their production in North America by the end of 2022. So it's an aggressive timeline, and that's how they're handling this supply chain, all these supply chain disruptions. So I thought we'd start with that as a, how one client is doing it, and we'll talk a bit about how we got here and what we can see moving forward. So this is a simplified view of the supply chain. I thought it would be useful to start with this. So if we look at our customers pulling product, whether it's the end customer. It's really much more complicated than this, but a simplified supply chain. We have a customer pulling from many times a distributor, not always. And then there's a manufacturer involved, at least one. As I said, this is simplified. And then there's then there's your suppliers, which you have typically at least 2 tiers of suppliers. Very simplified supply chain, really old world thinking. And then what happened is we went global. So in the last several years, we have really extended our supply chains. We have lengthened them. We've gone global. We've added a lot of complexity into our supply chain. And that was fine. We did it largely because we were saving costs originally with the high cost, in many products, the labor cost component was what compelled us to move some of our supply chain, like to Asia as an example. And then people just followed the crowd, and suddenly it is very much not uncommon to have customers and suppliers throughout the world and in an intricate supply chain where products even go back and forth from Europe to North America to Asia before they're ever sold to get to a complete product. So that's just the manufacturing piece of it. We obviously have container ships and customs brokers and transportation and air freight and all sorts of connections in the middle. So that was fine when everything was working along on a nice rhythm, and we were able to keep customers supplied. But then the pandemic arose, and this global supply chain became extremely disrupted. And with as many parts and pieces, it really created some massive disruption and complexity, which has still not worked itself out. And we're going to talk about that and how soon it will work itself out, if at all. So what happened is originally when the pandemic started, we all saw like empty shelves in the grocery store. And, on the aerospace side of things, pretty much the volume dropped off completely, at least on the commercial aerospace side of things. It was pretty detrimental, obviously. In the medical side, not necessarily so. Depends on what you were, if you're supporting doctors' offices, absolutely. Because I was working with a client that was a food manufacturer, actually. They supplied doctors' offices, and that dropped off the cliff. The sales to Starbucks in that case also dropped off the cliff because no one was going to Starbucks at the time during lockdown, at least not to eat this food bars. On the other hand, they sold to retail, and that was, really high volume. So volatility of demand was significantly disrupted. I was actually became like the toilet paper queen at the time because everybody was worried about what happened to all the toilet paper and what was going on. So like I talked to all sorts of people, including people like Bloomberg, on like toilet paper and what was going on. But basically, it was an unprecedented volatility of demand. And that created a misalignment of demand and supply. So just to use an example that's easy to follow with this global supply chain, if you think about clothing, what was coming on the container ships at the time that the lockdown started occurring in the US was for the next season, like the summer season. So that still arrived, and we eventually offloaded it, off the container ships, and we transported it, put it in warehouses. However, no one ever bought any of that because, we were locked in our houses. We didn't have to buy any clothing for the next season. By the time we came out of lockdown, the next season is what we were looking for. But because we were on lockdown, we didn't have any of it, or we couldn't get it off the trucks. So, you know, we had passed that by, but it's still there. So now we're left with the wrong, and because we had the product there in the first place, you know, it uses equipment like chassis. It's using your transportation carriers. You have empty containers that you can't get back to China. And basically the wrong product and equipment and supply chain pieces are in the wrong place at the wrong time. So we are completely out of alignment, and it's very hard to get this back into alignment. And then, of course, it was further exacerbated by things like the Suez Canal getting blocked, which, you know, at the time that this happened, you know, we're resilient. So, you know, we started like diverting shipments to different options and different routes. And then some of them were just stuck there. And so that affected, if you remember back in the global supply chain slide, that affected, if you have an interconnected supply chain with multiple steps in your process, and this, you know, let's say you have 5 layers of suppliers, which would definitely not be uncommon. And they were all over the world, or at least within multiple regions. You have to go back and forth, and then somebody along that route has been affected by one of these many issues coming on. It means that everyone else gets affected. So you are only as strong as your weakest link. It used to be a saying, but now it's become a reality because our weakest links have shown up. So it was further exacerbated by the Suez Canal, the Texas storms. So the Texas storms created, you know, dual edge problem here, because the Texas storm created extra demand for products like piping, because, you know, lots of pipes broke, and all the materials that go into those types of things. And it also created supply shortages because people couldn't get in and out, they couldn't produce, etc. So those types of, and then now we're in this situation where we have a severe labor shortage. We'll talk more about it, but there's no doubt about it. At the time, it's first started with COVID. And then we cut back people during COVID and lockdowns. Well, they didn't necessarily come back now. So we have a massive problem with labor. So the supply chain is completely out of alignment between all of this. And really it's resulted in extended lead times and soaring prices across the board. So what are some of the common themes that are coming out, and we're going to talk about what we can see going forward and what we can do to be successful in this environment. And this is really the 3 key areas, and we're going to go into these in more detail. But the first is, how do we become more resilient? How do we accomplish supply chain resiliency? Because one of the things we realized is that we are not resilient overall. I mean, of course, there are some companies that are more resilient than others and react faster to changing conditions, and they're going to be more successful. But we all, if we want to be successful moving forward, we are absolutely going to have to be resilient. Meaning that, you know, what's happening now is that more and more, like, no one wants to wait. So whether it's a business or a consumer, it does not matter. They're going to look for alternatives if you don't have the product available. And so what's happening is that they're trying alternatives, and then they're saying, you know what, this alternative works, or this supplier was available when I really needed them. And so I'm going to change my future supply chain to accommodate this. Or they're thinking, you know what, I had way too much risk in my supply chain. I need to change my supply chain. And we'll talk more about it: reshoring, nearshoring, reconfiguring. But as all of these changes happen, it means that it has, like I said, it's a continuum of a bunch of nodes in the supply chain. And as those nodes change, as the demand changes, everything continues to change. So the only way that we can be successful going forward, period, is to be resilient. So how do we build that resiliency in? We'll talk about that, and we have to be thinking about that. That's a really, really critical piece here. And then the next piece is talent, because if there's anything that's going on right now that, we'd have to be hiding under a rock not to know, is that we have a vast labor shortage. So there's what's called the Great Resignation, which the media has been talking about. But in addition to that, there's a great reshuffling going on. And that's what I'm seeing across all clients. And have clients in aerospace, medical devices, life sciences type of industries, food and beverage, building products. It does not matter. All of them are, if there's one thing in common, it's that there's a vast need for talent, and they have a shortage of talent. And they're continuing to lose key talent, which is highly problematic. So you have the people who are closer to retirement or at retirement age that have said, you know what, I'm done, I'm retiring. That's the Great Resignation. And that's a real problem because there's a brain drain going on that we haven't really accounted for in general, as well as we should. We've assumed that people that are taking over their spots can just do what the other person did, but that's like by no means showing up in reality. And then the reshuffling is people are moving between companies. Now that things have been virtual, they're like, well, I'm going to look for a job that's, more attractive, since I can work from home anyway. And then they're just deciding to change careers because of the pandemic. They're thinking life's short. I'm going to do what I really want to do, or I have the opportunity because there's a labor shortage and people are offering me these opportunities. So basically there's a great reshuffling. So the people who can find a way to be the one who gains the talent and develops the talent are going to be the ones that succeed. And I have a couple of key points I'm going to talk about when it comes to talent coming up, but it's absolutely a critical topic. And what I can also tell you anecdotally is that across clients, of course, I have clients that of course, all my clients are great, but, some of them are more proactive than others. And there's no doubt about it that the ones with the better cultures that treat people well and are, encouraging all the right things that you should be doing across the board is in terms of the best OD type of philosophies are more successful than the rest. And people do follow people. They don't follow companies. Like they don't leave companies, generally speaking. They're going to leave people. So, that I just say that there's a bunch related to talent that we have to be thinking about. And then the third area is digitization and data. And that's all three of these areas. There's no doubt about it that they're absolutely essential in today's environment. So one of the other areas that I do, in addition to manufacturing and supply chain consulting, is I'm well known in ERP selection circles. So have a lot of background there. And what I have found over the years prior to, I'd say, like since the pandemic started, is that although some clients really, really needed to upgrade their systems, and we would recommend that, in one case, I had to strong arm the client into doing it because they really had to do it if they were going to be successful. And that's still the case. However, 80% of the time anyway, we could make progress that could delay a system upgrade for, who knows, between 2 and I'd say 7 years anyway, which is pretty significant. And many clients really wanted to do that, better utilize their current system and find ways to improve profitability without going through such upheaval. So that's certainly a great strategy. However, since this pandemic has started, in order to create the level of supply chain resiliency needed and some of the evolving customer expectations, while also looking to automate and turn the data that's available into meaningful insights so that you can navigate the future with fewer people, not because you want fewer people necessarily, but because there are fewer people available. It's a compelling need to digitize, automate, etc. You really need a modern ERP as a base. So it's kind of become an assumption in terms of your ability to succeed. So it's created a significant demand for, even if you can move, if you can get through the next, let's say 2 years by improving the use of your current system, which every client can do, but it's not necessarily going to take you into the future. And you will end up behind the scenes now. So a modern ERP base is really quite essential. And then we're going to talk more about, that's by no means enough. That's just sort of like the base. So what we need to do now is like take it further. How do we, there's robotics, there's Internet of Things, there's digital twins, there's all sorts of things we could talk about in this area. AI, what of all that is meaningful and will help you succeed is really the key question. So I thought it would be useful to like give you a couple of stats that, in addition to the experiences that I'm talking about, these are some well-respected surveys, and they say the same thing I've just been saying. So I want to make, I thought it would be useful to put them up here. But the Thomas survey says that 83% of manufacturers are likely or very likely to reshore. That is meaningful and significant because it was only 54% in 2020, and that was during the pandemic. That's just like an amazing increase. And it's also what we're seeing across the board. As I said, a key client is not just reshoring, but reshoring rapidly. And basically it's being evaluated across the board. So it's happening. The tricky thing though is that it's not widely necessarily known, because of who in their right mind as an executive would tell everybody that they're reshoring, because then their suppliers are going to ditch them and not prioritize them. It makes absolutely no sense to be known for this. So that's the problem. It's happening. It's just happening on the slide, if you will. So it's tricky, because I actually talked with the Wall Street Journal recently, and they were saying, could you put me in touch with people? And it was really a struggle. I ended up putting them in touch with people who are absorbing volume because people are reshoring. But a lot of people said, you know what, I just don't want to be publicized. So anyway, that's one survey. And then the from Industry Week, on the technology side, 72% are saying that the pandemic is increasing the urgency of undergoing a digital transformation. I would think if they would survey them today, that number would have skyrocketed even higher as well. And then Deloitte is saying that talent is essential. Again, I mean, every one of these numbers changes on a daily basis, and it only gets higher. And then I thought this was like a really high number, but I have to say 100% of my clients are experiencing this. And that is 94% of folks surveyed experience a negative impact to revenue from supply chain disruption. And that is definitely new. Like prior to the pandemic, that was really, it's got to be a really small number in comparison. So that's an enormous impact. And that's why folks are really looking at what do I need to do differently in the future from what I've been doing? So this is, I thought that might be helpful. And then according to the Institute of International Finance, supplier delays will persist into 2022. However, I'm going to talk more about that because it's not something to hang your hat on. So what are some of the impacts and strategies that the impacts to us? And then more importantly, what are some strategies that we really should be focusing our attention on that will help us succeed? Because I think that I'm confident that we're in a period of time that's never happened since the Great Depression. And that is that the winners are being separated from the losers, meaning that more companies either shot forward and are still today pre-pandemic anyhow, were wildly successful and in the top of their field since the Great Depression. And they could have been nobody during the Great Depression, but they came out of it and they were proactive, and they propelled forward. And then the rest are going to be dwindling, absorbed, or die. So the successful are going to be separated from the robust. So I think that it's a great opportunity. And it's also something that we have to be extremely focused on and quickly looking at doing. So the first of these more detailed look at what we should be doing is looking at customer personalization, configuration. I'm seeing this across the board. So in highly engineered products like for sure, aerospace and, configure to order type environments as well. So you got to look at not just your customers' volume, like who you ship to, but your customers, or maybe your customers, until you get to the end of that row, whoever that is. And so like on my example earlier, just because may as well refer back to it, where I was saying I was working with a food bar manufacturer that supplied their customer was not a Starbucks, and it was not the medical office that I was talking about. It wasn't even Costco. So their customer, like the key there was, who did their customers service? If they serviced the medical office, that was highly problematic because their volume was tanking. So understanding the customers was really critical in that case, but it's true across the board. So a lot of effort should be spent on understanding your customers, of course, but you're also what's happening in their world and who are their customers and what's changing. What are the evolving expectations of customers? Because as I said, if you look at it from a consumer point of view, it's easy to think about the same thing is happening no matter the industry. And that is that, let's stick with food just because it's easy to understand. If we were forced to try a new item because our items that we wanted to eat were not available, we might just find out that we liked it. Well, the same thing is happening across the board. We might find, hey, this supplier is better than like what I had before, or my redesigned product is actually an improvement, or we find out that this is a improvement to the picture. So we start ordering from the new supplier, or maybe we even tweak it further and then start ordering something even newer. So we're evolving our expectations on the fly, which is terribly normal for us if we're on the side pulling this, but it's not known in our complex supply chain. They have no idea. They're still working with what we were doing, months ago. Who knows? It depends. I don't know if we've been communicating, but basically, if we don't keep track of what's happening on our customer side, the same thing is happening to us. So it's really critical to get to know your customers, and to be thinking about what you can do to provide personalized service. How do you configure? How do you get more responsive to changing customer conditions is really what you want to be doing. So that's one thing to think about. It goes right next to this idea of reshoring, nearshoring, reconfiguration. So every single client across many industries and many sizes, because we work with companies that are small and medium-sized, like closely held businesses, to private equity-backed firms, to several global enterprises, headquartered in the US, headquartered in Germany, and elsewhere. And so every single one is relooking at this picture. Should they be, and this is just a visual to explain it, but it depends on what your individual situation looks like. Should we just say, let's bring back everything? No, of course not, because it depends on your situation. Who are your suppliers? What partners do you have potential to work with? There's so many questions to be thinking about. But the idea here is that generally speaking, across the board, we're looking at really locating manufacturing closer to the customer. If you think about it, how do you be more resilient? One way is to be located closer to your customer so that you can produce as you figure out what the changing customer requirements are. Because just positioning inventory close doesn't help if they've changed their mind. It's a problem. So how do we, in some cases you would position inventory, and in some cases you would just position production. And one way to do that as well is looking at 3D printing. It's not like a solution for all situations, but it's kind of a combination of all these factors. And folks are also looking at regional clusters, like locating closer to suppliers where you can kind of function as one company without being one company, where you can be more resilient as a group. So these are some of the key strategies that are happening. Also, of course, with the risks being exposed, we're looking at how do we look at backup suppliers? How do we think more strategically about what we're doing from a supply point of view? Because I can just use an example from when I was a vice president of operations and supply chain. We had a critical material. So do you do this across the board? No, of course not. It would be cost prohibitive. But we did it for our critical material. And what we did is we put in a backup supplier, which everyone says they have. But we did it in reality, which I have to say I had trouble with the board of directors because because it was going to cost more money. Because basically, in order to bring in, we had our main source of this critical material in Brazil. And they were a good supplier, and they were, it was good costs, etc. However, we knew that we really needed to have a source that would be closer to our customer base, that would allow us to flex quickly and account for changing conditions. So we set up a relationship with a supplier in South Carolina, and we bought 20% of everything we needed from them, even though it cost us more money, which, like I said, was to the big chagrin of the board of directors, because they really were not happy with us for spending extra money. However, as life would happen, unpandemic related, there was a shortage. There was two things that happened. In one case, we had a shortage of materials throughout the industry. And in our case, we were prioritized because we had been taking product all along. And the other thing that happened is of course, when it looks at Brazil, like what would happen, there was like a trade problem and the ports had an issue and we couldn't get anything. Everything was delayed, if you will, from Brazil. So we were able to convert the other supplier and they came online, and we were well satisfied, and we were a medium-sized company that was privately held. So we weren't the big dog for sure on their list of priorities, but we were consistent. So anyway, I throw that out there. It's just one strategy, and it depends, what's your supply chain in the first place? Do you need a backup supplier? Do you need it for all supplies? Those kinds of questions. Definitely each situation is of its own, but it's something to jump on and look at. Now, this slide is a bit of an eye chart, but it's so impactful and we found it to be so successful that it's worth it. So I put it here anyway. So the idea here is many folks don't know that this is what's happening, but a program called Sales Inventory Operations Planning, sometimes called SIOP, sometimes just called S&OP for Sales and Operations Planning, and many times not even called that at all. It's just called how do we better service our customers more profitably? But what it really is it's been extremely impactful. The clients who we were further along in putting together this sort of a process for them, and it's not an off-the-shelf solution, the unfortunate news, but it's tailored to the situation, because of course it relates very much to your supply chain picture, etc. Those clients that have a process in place have been far more successful than the others in terms of servicing customers during this period. And then currently there's several clients that have been calling because they realize they need to scale up. And in order to do that, they have to get a better handle on this. So what is this? Basically, the common problem is that sales has a dollar level forecast. They say, I'm going to sell 100 million. Sounds good. And then they're saying, well, so why are we running out? What's the problem here? We said we were going to do 100 million and we did 101 million. How hard is this? They don't know. That's just, what they know. They spend a lot of time on this $100 million forecast. Well, operations has no idea what in the world products that means. And therefore they don't know what lines to run, what materials to order, what storage they need, what equipment they might need. So they can't do anything about it. And then as the forecast comes in, sales is saying, hey, I told you ahead of time, what's the problem here? And operations is saying, but I knew nothing. I didn't have any forecast as meaningful. And, like we continue to argue. And then new products, throws in something into the mix along the way, of course. So that's the problem. But what this strategy does is it creates typically speaking, like a 12 to 18 month view of the forecast. And we break it into, it depends on the situation, but we break it into at least a directional forecast that would allow us to know what types of products we need to run, to the level of knowing like at least which machinery will need to run more over than the other machinery, what types of skills we'll need, because we have to be thinking about people in advance, what types of storage requirements might be needed. It depends on your industry, but in some cases, the storage requirements is a big problem. And we really get the product level detail to a directional point of view so we can make meaningful decisions. That's the key. And we might need to know engineering capacity. We're working with a client that's heavily engineered to order. They said they couldn't possibly do this because every product is different, but it's never true. I mean, there's always some commonalities. So we could get it to the point of commonality, even if it's not to the point of like, we wouldn't produce anything until we had more clarity, but we had the right people, the right equipment, the right materials, etc. coming, then we can be more successful. So that's the idea of the SIOP process. It's a monthly process. So you never look at it and then leave it alone. As I just said, evolving customer conditions. So it helps us focus in on exceptions instead of survival, if you will. And it's driven over time, like this study by the Hackett Group, it's driven significant sales growth, cost reduction, and working capital improvement. However, during the pandemic, which is probably much more important, it's really allowed us to increase our sales far more than this because we have the product to sell, which is kind of really important in today's world. And we also are scaling in the right items so that we can grow the business. So definitely something worth considering. When it comes to talent, there's two things that I'd like to leave you with. I could talk about each of these topics for at least an hour each, but you all would be asleep, I'm sure, or, another, having conflicting priorities to be sure. So we'll whittle it down to two. So one is, let's look at discovering your hidden talent. After consulting here for almost 16 years, I've yet to meet a client that didn't have hidden talent that they were overlooking, sometimes deliberately, sometimes not deliberately, because they just did not know that this particular talent would be so meaningful if either engaged, or if that person was, if we listen to the ideas, or maybe if they were put into a position that used their skills, their strengths, I mean. So there's hidden talent throughout every organization. The key is having a new set of eyes as to how you're looking in your organization and how you can leverage the assets that you have, because it's going to be even more critical for sure as we have this great resignation and great reshuffling happening. The other thing is, this number two idea is that we've been hiring talent, and that's just been our approach for, I don't know, since I started my career. So a long time. That no longer is going to work, because where are you going to hire the talent from? So, sure, once in a while you'll find talent. That's fine. But it's not the strategy that's going to take us to the future, especially since we have more people who are going to be retiring soon rather than, than any other time in history. If they haven't already started, they've already started, but there are more and more people retiring, if nothing else. Hopefully not more reshuffling, but so far it looks like that's continuing too. So what do we need to do instead? We need to forget about hiring talent. Put somebody good on that topic, but the focus really needs to be on developing and retaining talent, finding your hidden talents, but developing talent. I mean, it's something that we didn't used to, we didn't have to do it. Now we need to do it. We need to be good at it. What does this mean? It means we're going to need even more, the people who have good leaders are going to succeed. So how do we develop leaders? How do we get this going? We need to be thinking about this topic, to be sure. And then the last major area before I go into, how long will this whole thing last? And, I'm giving you some strategies we should be implementing immediately here, but is to digitize and translate data into insights. So like I said earlier, one of the things that you can do is that if we don't have enough people available, plus also, we're always looking at how do we take unnecessary costs out of our system, and of course retrain people to be more meaningful positions that'll add value to our products and services. So if we look at it that way, there's no doubt about it that we need to be digitizing our supply chain, which means automating, utilizing data so that we can make better decisions. How do we connect and gain visibility into our supply chain? That's critical. We were talking about that earlier. So how do we, there's a lot of terms that we've listed here: artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, additive technologies, so the 3D printing ideas, mixed reality. There's a lot of opportunities there for improving on quality, safety, etc. Even incorporating customer designs quickly. There's lots of technology. So the key here is like, number one, don't just jump off and go on the fad that you hear most about. It's liable to lead you straight to death. Instead of doing that, we have to back up and look at what are we doing? What is our supply chain today? What's our customers' needs? What's evolving? What are we going to be doing? And then how do we automate, digitize, utilize data to support our path forward? Then we figure out which ones to focus attention on. And this is all assuming that you have a modern ERP system. Many times when you have a modern ERP system, these are more advancements that you can make. And then the other thing I'd add to this, because it is really important, is turning data into insights is going to be the most successful clients do that well. And I have to say, oh my gosh, it's so amazing. Even the biggest of companies and well-known names have really big struggles with data. So many times what we find when we're looking at like the SIOP programs that I was talking about earlier is that data is one of those key elements, because how do we get the data to sync up between all these players? So it's about the people, the processes, the data, and the technologies. But one of the key pieces that seems to cause havoc is data, because there's data that's incorrect. There's data that's, for some reason we have customers that have all different numbers that mean the same thing, products with the same problem. I could go on and on and on. And we have to find ways to not get so hung up on the problems that are going on with data that we make no progress. Because like I said, we will be one of the ones that go the direction we don't want to go, towards death instead of towards success. So how do we like make some meaningful change to our data so we can get some insights and better predict our revenue, better predict our capacities, understand what we need. That's the key here. So I'm emphasizing it because it's really quite critical. It's definitely one of the keys that successful clients have in common. So it is tricky because finding the talent that knows how to do this is also a tricky problem. So so I'd say that just put some effort into it, because like I could talk about this for another hour or two, but we don't have another hour. So just be thinking about, does it mean you need a BI system? Business intelligence? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, most people like would prefer it for sure. Does it mean you need predictive analytics? Could be preferred, but maybe not. It depends where you're starting. So we've seen that some clients that have like the worst situation you can imagine in terms of their ERP system, even if they have like an advanced one, they can have an SAP and not use it more as like where they key in checks and balances and don't use it at all. So you'd be surprised what we see out there. But basically it's, how do you take whatever you have when it comes to data, take whatever you have and turn it into something more meaningful, but quickly? That's the key. So be thinking about that. So I see we have some questions. I'll take them, but before we do that, I'd like to talk about how long it's going to last. You know, when I was reading up on computer chips recently, because it was related to another speech and client that I was talking about. But before that, I was reading up on another topic. Basically, everyone has their own predictions. And a lot of people are saying 2022, late 2022, maybe 2023. Well, and then like there was a time when I was saying, well, 2023, 2024. Now I'm saying it's going to last forever. We're in a new era. And the next normal is our supply chains are going to be evolving continually. That is the new normal, because if you think about it, when will demand settle back down? Well, if we have all these supply chain disruptions and we continually change what our customers' needs are, because they're changing expectations based on what's available, they're trying new things, they're redesigning products. And then we get into like, we're reconfiguring our supply chain again, probably redesigning products. We're bringing in new equipment. Everything is changing. So the customers' expectations are going to continually change, which means that if we stay with a static situation, we're going to continually have a supply chain disruption, because we won't know what those things are unless we're ahead of them. Again, why PSYOP is helpful. So I would say that customer volatility is going to stay volatile and changing. And so the supply side has to become resilient and flexible, so that we're basically the companies and executives that are proactive and are following the strategies I was talking about, they can be caught up, if you will, in 2022, early 2022. It depends, but you can be caught up near term if you can get your supply chain to be more resilient and predictive. Doesn't mean you have to reshore everything tomorrow, because it's not even practical in many cases. You should be pursuing it, possibly, in many cases. Pursuing that is one avenue, but it's how you get from here to there. So it's like we have to reconfigure our organizations, our technology space, and our processes to be so that we don't need to be waiting for everybody else who's waiting for 2024 or beyond. This computer chip article that I was reading said, well, we've been delayed more. Now we're not talking months, we're talking years. Well, why wait years? Let's just reconfigure on our own and be ahead of the pack. So that's the deal. Is the good news is that we can control it, and we can be in a much better place more imminently. The bad news is that we may still be talking about when we're going to get caught up and when the ports are going to get caught up years from now. I mean, they're just making strategies so that the containers aren't counted sitting at the ports. Now they've slowed down the containers going into the ports so they don't look like they're piled up there. And so that, and this part is good, and they don't like put all of the exhaust into the air right by the port. But slowing it down doesn't do anything for getting them unloaded faster. And then finding trucks for them. And then finding warehouses to store them. So that's the how long it'll last. I'll answer some questions and definitely want to point you to some free resources. Like this is one where you can free download of some insights. I have free newsletters where I'm always providing these types of predictions. So feel free to answer them. And Elizabeth, I can start by seeing what kind of questions you have and definitely answer them.
Thanks so much, Lisa. We did have one question from Jerry come in asking about looking, you had talked about digital and investing in technologies. How about autonomous or automating warehouses because of the talent shortage? Is that one direction to look? It doesn't get the products here faster, but might move them around.
No, and that's a good question. And absolutely, when it comes to, there's a lot of topics we're talking about here. One of them is, there's two answers to this question. So it depends on if you have an e-commerce element, which I didn't talk a lot about, but there's clearly e-commerce went through the roof during the pandemic because everyone wanted something delivered to their house, or even in the business setting, the drop ships increased dramatically. And the reason I'm bringing that up is that that's not changing. So what's happening is that, I don't know, let's just say it went tenfold. Maybe it's come down to ninefold, but it's not going back to one. It's definitely continuing to stay. And the impact on the warehouse is you have a very different situation when you're shipping pieces than when you're shipping boxes. And definitely automation comes into play because there is no way to ship pieces manually too efficiently, that's for sure. Or forget about your costs, but even just keeping up with customer demand, it's like a losing proposition. And most clients have found, and most experts have found, that you pretty much need to, if you have both going on in your warehouse, you need to have like two separate warehouses in a way. And then you really need to add in some automation, at least in the e-commerce portion of your warehousing, which, there's WMS, there's like auto, picking locations. There's various ways you can, I worked with a company who was looking at various automating and digitizing their warehouse. That was the key aspect. And there's all sorts of strategies you can look at. So I would definitely say for the e-commerce, or if you have e-commerce and not e-commerce, you absolutely have to look at that because you just won't be able to keep up. You are going to be on the path of one of the ones that won't be successful if you don't look at that. It's almost a strategy for survival, let alone a strategy for success, just to keep up with changing demands. But then there's like, how do you meet some of these changing customer expectations quickly? And some of the ways to automate and digitize the warehouses is important there. Now, from just a plain warehousing standpoint, regardless of whether you're e-commerce or not e-commerce, there's still a lot of reasons. Like, for example, the virtual technologies, there's conveyors. It depends on your space, how much space do you have, and how can you utilize them. But what's definitely true is that there's a definite trend to automating, digitizing both manufacturing and warehousing in order to succeed. So there's a very high demand in both of those fields right now, and it really needs to be proactive because if you think about it, what's one of the key last points before the customer is it's going through some sort of a warehouse, even if it's a warehouse attached to your manufacturing operation. So does that answer the question, Elizabeth?
I think so. And we do have another one here. We've got a few more minutes. Seth says, well, he has a comment first, that there are huge opportunities in collaboration and partnership if the industries work together, including competition. There is enough capacity in the market, and hence working together is the way to go forward. What are your views, Lisa?
Yeah, actually, no, it's really a great point. I collaborate, to use your term, actually, with Harvey Mudd, which probably most of you are aware, but they're like the #1 engineering school. And they happen to have started a manufacturing practice several years back. So I collaborate with them, and we bring together a group of executives. Was in person, and we were doing it virtually. But bring together a group of executives. And one of the key topics was just what you brought up, is collaborating with the competition, which sounded crazy, but every executive that was there by the end of our session, and this is even pre-pandemic, said, you know what, actually, we've collaborated with our competition many times already when it made sense. It's just a matter of quickly evaluating, make sure you take care of, like you're looking at the big picture and where your guidelines are or your limits are. But that was happening even pre-pandemic. But what I'm seeing is during the pandemic, some of the more successful companies are absolutely looking at partnering with the competition. It just seems somewhat crazy, but we are going to be, if you can make 1 + 1 = 22, you both can be much more successful. It's just a matter of working out the way the partnership will work, or for which products, or how can you make it a win-win is really the key. It's not typically across the board where you'd combine companies, but you can find a win-win. So I'm seeing folks collaborate with competitors for sure. And then I agree with you too, because the regional cluster idea is just that. It's how do you collaborate across the board? And then the other thing that's coming up is regional collaborating with academics. Sorry about this phone here, but collaborating with academics and also even like public entities. So collaborating across different types of companies that can work together is very important today.
Wonderful. Well, it looks like we're getting to the top of the hour. So thank you, Lisa. This was a great presentation. I really appreciate your time. And I do want to thank our sponsors again. Big Kaiser Precision Tooling, offering a full line of high precision cutting tools that are the superior choice for increasing production capacity and quality. Kyocera SGS Precision Tools pioneers some of the world's most advanced cutting tool technologies, resulting from rigorous product coding and material testing. Makino, an industry leader in machinery design and digital innovations. Makino introduces game-changing solutions for premium performance, producing accurate, high-quality metal cutting and EDM machines. And Sandvik, at the forefront of our manufacturing tools, machining solutions, and knowledge to drive industry standards and innovations demanded by the metalworking industry now and into the next industrial era. And Lisa, I see that you've shared your contact information with everyone.
Yep, and like I said, there's free newsletters, and happy to answer questions as they arise.
Wonderful. And for everyone in attendance, I just want to remind everyone that we will have this recording available. It will be posted on our website, and you will get a link through Zoom, how you register to that recording once it is available. And then 2022 is right around the corner, and our first webinar will be about the latest trends in additive manufacturing, featuring Terry Wohlers from Wohlers Associates. He speaks a couple times a year with us and our audience, so make sure you register for that. Those can all be found on our website, todaysmedicaldevelopments.com/webinars or aerospacemanufacturinganddesign.com/webinars. Thank you, Lisa. This was a great conversation with everyone. I appreciate it. Thanks for everyone's attendance today.
Enjoyed it.
Have a wonderful day, everyone.